It is not enough to just identify what it is that's important to somebody. It's helpful to make the connection, but you have to tie your work and the job that you're asking this person to do into what's important to them.
So here's the thing. We are all living in this strange pandemic time as small business owners, recognizing the value of our team members. We don't have the luxury we used to have of rapid turnover. I know. It sounds terrible, but in many businesses, that's something you really rely on is the number of people out in the marketplace who are really able to replace team members. That idea of people are dispensable is just not true. And it's really opening our eyes as leaders to the value of the talent we have on our team. Now, how do you cultivate that? How do you keep those team members? How do you build a high-performing team that will stay with you and value their position? This is what we're talking about today. I'm so excited to share with you Julia Bernstein. She's an expert in this field. She's an expert in building high-performing teams. She has a background in the restaurant business. She's pulled many restaurants out of the funk that they were in by focusing on these really key leadership skills. And in today's podcast, we're going to be talking about those tips that she has for her businesses that she consults now on how to build high-performing teams. She's also going to tell us mistakes that leaders make, which is really interesting, and give us some real quality suggestions and examples and stories from businesses that she's worked with. And I challenge her with some interesting questions. As a business owner myself, I know some of the concerns that are going to come up for those of you who are listening. So let's find out from Julia what she suggests on how to build a high-performing team. Hello, and welcome to the Business of Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy, and today is going to be a phenomenal day because we're having a conversation with Julia Bernstein. I'm so excited to bring this to you. I cannot wait for you to get to meet her. So let's not delay any longer. Hey, Julia.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing so well. And I'm so excited for you right now because you're in the process of launching this new book. You've got so many things going on in your life. I can't wait to hear all about it. But tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, absolutely. So I have been working as a leadership development expert for quite some time now. And I actually started as an operator. I started in the restaurant industry. I was in that industry for 10 years and found a lot of success building really high performing teams. And then I really did a little bit of soul searching and decided that what I really wanted to focus on was helping leaders find the same success that I did. Yeah. So I moved into the HR space and I have been there for another 10 years where I have worn two hats. One is I've really taught leaders how to do what it is that I have done and found success with. But I've also been blessed with the opportunity to speak to thousands of employees who are unmotivated and employees who are upset about certain aspects of their work environment. And I've been able to extract out of them what it is that we need to do better and how leaders can support their employees better.
And, I don't think there's anything more important in small businesses right now is having that avenue of communication and understanding between leaders and their teams, especially in this weird COVID era when we are having such staffing shortages across the board. And so more than ever, we need to be more sensitive to these really important aspects of our businesses. So what is it, Julia? What do leaders need to know? What is something that you find surprisingly leaders are ignoring in terms of this understanding?
So I think even pre-COVID, but has just been magnified in COVID, is that leaders, we wear a lot of hats. There are a lot of things that we have to juggle, plates spinning at all times. And I think one of the biggest mistakes or errors that leaders make is to not maintain an awareness of our people. Where are our people right now? What are their needs? And, even more so now in COVID.
Absolutely. So how do you do that? How do you cultivate that awareness?
Sure. So this is something that I unpack in a lot of detail in my book. And I've kind of reverse engineered everything that it is that I do and packaged it into some pretty easy to follow steps. And really what it's about is finding that thing that exists in our employees that sparks some motivation to take action, right? So I've used the acronym of SPARK. So here's the first thing that I do. The first thing that I do is I make sure to stay aware. So often we get pulled into tunnel vision, and we have to make a conscious decision to not only remain aware, but also remain curious about what it is that's going on with our employees. Even if we think we know, we might not. So that's the first step. The second is to pinpoint clues. So we have to know what we're looking for. What's important to people is what they surround themselves with, pictures, logos, things like that, what's located at their desks. And then also, how do they spend their time? What are they requesting time off for? What do they do on the weekends? What do they do when they're not at work with you? And then also too, some really important clues are just emotional reactions. How do people react to certain things that are happening, things that you say, things that you're asking them to do? So these are all clues that can help us hone in on what it is that's really important to those people individually and uniquely. And then,
I apologize. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead. Then the final, are we at K here? I'm taking notes, Julia.
Oh, we're only at P, Tarryn. We're
only at P here. My gosh.
Yeah.
So we're still talking about pinpointing those clues. Yeah. I'm taking, wow. See how I just rushed to the next thing. Isn't that interesting? And I think that's also something that business owners do. Like, give me the skinny, give me the 10 things or the 3 things I need to do. And then we just want to move on. So please, I apologize. This is exactly what you're talking about, is just paying attention to those really important clues. And these are all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next thing that you want to do is the A stands for ask calibrated questions. It's not enough to just observe, but you need to make that connection with people. Asking those questions shows people that you're aware, that you see them, and it also helps to confirm that what it is that you're assuming is something that's important to them actually is. So then the R is recognize the response. When something's important to somebody, we really, we respond. If something's important to me, I respond with, being really happy. So I'm going to talk about it a lot. I'm going to smile. I'm going to make eye contact with you. Those are things that show that something's important. But also too, and what I think leaders pass over is identifying or acknowledging that a response of emotion that's negative, so anger, frustration, is also something that identifies something that's really important to somebody. So if we're losing something or feel as though we have a threat of losing something that's important to us, then we have that emotional response. And that's also something to recognize as a clue. And so then the K is to know the driver. So at the root of all action, it really ties back to a very simplified version of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? At the root of all action, we do things either to protect or to gain one of 3 needs, either to survive, the need to connect either with family or friends or even at work, or a need of sense of self, some aspect of sense of self. So what is our purpose, our identity, a need to grow and find meaning and fulfillment. So we're always going to act to either gain or to protect survival, connection, and a sense of self.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is all extremely valuable information and so important. I love that you also challenged with asking those calibrated questions, because a lot of those motivational interviewing skills are coming in there. Is what am I understanding? Just because you notice or you pinpoint something that you think is important, it's important to also follow up and make sure that that is the truth for that person. You're not just making assumptions about what is important in their lives.
That's right. That's right. So important.
Yeah. So let's say we do this as a boss, as a leader, and become more and more interested and ask all the questions and challenge our team members to share their truth, and paying close attention to that body language and the skill and the responses that our team members are giving us when we're asking those questions, understanding even their why. So I'm imagining a great kind of team conversation about what's important to you. Once we have all of this, now what?
Great question. I'm so glad you asked that. It is not enough to just identify what it is that's important to somebody. It's helpful to make the connection, but you have to tie your work and the job that you're asking this person to do into what's important to them. That's a really important step that I think a lot of leaders miss.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of different ways that we can do this, right? So, for example, if my family is very important to me, protecting that time off for when my child needs me is very, very important. That is going to help me feel supported by my employer, and it's going to motivate me to show up as a better person, a more fulfilled person, and a more dedicated employee when it's time for me to work. So there's that aspect. But there's so many examples that I can share with you. Do you mind if I share one?
I would love it, because I think the more concrete examples we have, the more we can understand this concept.
Yeah. So I'm going to share an example of something that I did personally when I was in the restaurant industry, which drove change. And if you're a leader, if you lead people, you certainly have come to some sort of crossroads where you have had to make a decision or an announcement that you knew was not going to be a popular one, and you had to pull people through change, right? So here was the scenario. I was a restaurant manager, and I had a team of roughly 50 servers. It was a table service concept, okay? And now servers make the majority of their living off of tips, right? Especially so in Connecticut. This isn't necessarily true in every state, but in Connecticut, servers make less than federal minimum wage because there's an assumption that they're making tips as well. So at that point in time, our servers were only making $5 an hour on payroll. Literally their entire livelihood was based off of tips. So there was an initiative that the concept that I worked for that was rolling out, which was going to reduce table section sizes to 4 tables per section. This is not going to go well with my servers. They usually had anywhere between 6 and 8 tables. And all they were going to hear if I said, I'm now slashing your section size from 8 tables to 4, is they were going to lose half of their income. And that's going to be a really impactful moment for them. There was going to be a lot of emotion attached to that. So because I knew my servers really well, I was able to anticipate that was going to be a really big pill for them to swallow. So I knew that if I took the company-driven or suggested approach of explain to them the why, tell them all of the benefits, it really wasn't going to land well, because they would be completely blinded by this emotion of potentially not being able to support themselves and their families. So the company's direction was to help them understand that if they had less tables, they could upsell, which would increase the check average, and then that would lead to better tips. They could also potentially turn their tables a little bit faster because they were able to pay more attention to them, right? But I knew my servers. This wasn't going to fly with them. It just wasn't going to fly. So instead, I started to use the Spark approach without even at the time knowing. I used the Spark approach, and I started to maintain an awareness of what else was going on that were pain points for them. So my servers were fantastic servers, absolutely phenomenal. And they had very large sections, but they ran around like crazy in the back of house. On the sales floor, on the restaurant floor with their tables, they were very composed and professional, but behind the scenes, they were running around like mad people. And it's very high paced, high stress. People were upset. And when I would sit down with them at the end of their shift, I started asking them about how they were feeling going through those shifts, right? what was so stressful? And man, that must be really hard to leave and go home to your kids after being so stressed out and running around so crazy. You're exhausted going home. That must be really hard. And what that did is it started to bring this awareness to to the surface that they were struggling with something, right? So then I started asking them those questions more and more, calibrated questions. And then when it was time for me to explain to them, or to kind of drop the bomb that these table sections were going to get smaller, I led with the approach of exhaustion and stress. So I explained to them, listen, I know that you guys are extremely stressed out on shift. I want to try something. The company is rolling this out, and I want to try this, but I want to make sure that all of your needs are also fulfilled. So I knew that money was going to come up, and it did. So instead of just dismissing that, I asked them, okay, we need to maintain your financial income. We know that you can upsell, we know that you can turn tables faster, but what do you need from us in order to make that happen? And they were very honest in what their fears were going to be. If they had smaller section sizes, the tickets that they were bringing in were going to go so much faster back to the grill. So it's going to take more time for the food to come out. So they need more back of house support in order to make that happen for them, right? We had not thought of that, but it was something that they absolutely needed. What else did they need? They needed tricks and verbiage in order to upsell better. So we gave them that training. So then they also needed help with, clearing tables and running food. So we gave them more support on that end. So when this change went live, they were connected to the relief that it gave them on an emotional and stress level. And they felt supported from the back end to make sure their income and their livelihood was protected.
What we need right now is to leverage happiness in the workplace. If you're a leader or manager struggling with retaining team members and frustrated with the current staffing shortage, group coaching for your team is your solution. Christina Unrein and I have partnered together to build a 10-week group coaching workshop for your business, focused directly on increasing happiness and positivity in the workplace. How do we do this? We use the awesome systems you already have in place and support your team members directly with tools for a mindset shift for awareness of their individual power to own their own happiness. Learn how to cultivate accountability for happiness in your team members and guide them with the tools to own their empowerment at work. Turning around workplace culture starts with individuals, and Christina and I are here for you. Email me at taryn@thebizofhappiness.com if you are ready to make workplace happiness your competitive advantage. Yeah, I love that.
Our transition went so much smoother than everyone else's because our servers knew that we had their back.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love that open dialogue as well. And how fascinating that. And it's so funny, Julia, because we know this to be true. And for some reason, we seem to forget it, but we don't have all the answers. Our teams who are in the trenches have so many answers and suggestions if we're just open to hearing them. And so giving them that opportunity, what do you suggest? How can we support you? And then coming to some really easy to solve problems.
That's right.
And then they feel heard as well, which is another enormously empowering aspect of the story. That's really cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's really cool. And, one of the things I've heard you say is that it's not enough to just share your why, that explaining your purpose as a company, as an organization, as a business is not enough for inspiration to get your team on board. And I think you've touched on this a little bit here, but please expand on that for us.
Sure. So There has been so much focus and so much weight put into the value of sharing the why. There is this concept out there that if people feel good about their work, if they feel as though they're contributing to something bigger, then that will in and of itself motivate people to want to work. And it will just magically build this perfect team for you. And the reality is, it's not working. It's falling short. But here's the thing, I don't think that it's invaluable. We should absolutely, as companies, share our purpose. It humanizes an organization, right? And it will attract those who are just as passionate about those things. And that's great, but it's not enough because it focuses on something that has nothing to do with the individual that we're employing. Yeah. It cannot be just that if we're expecting our employees to show up motivated and in their best self and ready to work and be the most productive. So that's why that falls short. In order to motivate people to act, we have to identify what it is that's most important to them and meet them where they are and use the work that we're asking them to do and the relationship that we have with them as employees to help them fulfill what it is that's most important to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially now as things are becoming more and more apparent that we don't just have the luxury of turnover like we used to in the past. These are really valuable members of our team.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a bidding war out there right now. I mean, it is brutal.
It is. It's crazy.
It is.
And it's definitely something that needs a mindset shift from a leadership perspective. And you know what I just want to be the devil's advocate here because I can hear business owners right now saying, Julia, this is all awesome. But man, this sounds like it takes a lot of time. We're already strapped. We're already a skeleton staff. Yeah. I'm already burning the candle at both ends. And now I have to find time in my day to sit down with each team member and find out what their why is and their purpose and check for their reactions and then have a meeting. What do you say to those business owners, especially small businesses who are just keeping their head above water right now when their biggest concern is time and availability for just having these conversations?
Absolutely. I would say do not make a meal of it. I don't think that this is something that would be most effective with a private sit-down meeting where you get to know your employees. This is much more effective when it's done organically, just in passing conversation. So instead of carving out time in your schedule to do this, just work it in. When you come in for the day, ask people how they're doing and how they spent their weekend, right? When they request some time off, of course, talk to them about it, but pay attention to what it is that they're doing in that time off. If you walk by their desk and there's a picture that you've never noticed, maybe it's them, climbing Mount Rushmore, I don't know, or of their kids in a sports uniform. Ask them about it. Hey, is that your son? I didn't know that they've played baseball. It's literally a 5-second conversation that can be put together piece by piece to just build that relationship with your team members and understand who they are and where they are.
Yeah, that does sound a lot less stressful when you put it that way. Another question I have is, you had mentioned making people's values and their strengths more aligned with what they do. So in other words, taking their job description and incorporating some of these interesting aspects of their work or of their lives into their work so that they find it more valuable. And I love that concept. I've used that concept myself in business and found it enormously rewarding. But something that I've heard from other business owners is it realistic to tailor my business for the individual? I know what I need in terms of tasks that need to be completed and in terms of positions that need to be held in this office and the responsibilities that need to be taken care of. But how can I imagine now tailoring my whole business to each of these team members' individual needs and wants and passions?
Yeah, I don't think that you should tailor your business to individual needs and wants and passions. You're a business owner and you exist for a purpose, right? And you have to run your business the way that you need to run your business. This isn't about recreating your business. It's just about a way of connecting with your people and giving them bits and pieces of ways to perform their job that are specific to their needs. So let me give you an example. If you have an employee, let's say you have a receptionist, we'll keep it super simple, right? Let's say you have a receptionist who complains a lot about the job duties, about the system that you have, about how many calls come in, about the phone, whatever it is. If you are able to ask that person what would relieve things for them, or challenge that person to say, hey, listen, I know you hate this system. In about 90 days or so, or even if it's later off, 6 months, a year, my contract with this system is going to end. Why don't you do some research on what systems exist out there that would better fit your needs in fulfilling this role and performing your job? So give it to them. Give them an opportunity to look for the things that they need. Target does this very well, by the way. Every year they ask an employee, or they solicit input from employees on just simple procedural tweaks that they can do. Target is still going to be Target, right? They're not going to do an upheaval of the way that they do business or their business model, but they solicit input from their teams. And once a year, they select one idea that one person is able to completely create, and then they implement that and roll it out into their business model. And that's something that not only gets the buy-in of that one person, but because it was created by somebody who does the job of everybody else, they understand that perspective in a way that we all might not be able to in a C-suite exec level. So there's a lot of buy-in that happens there. So it's just a couple of examples, but you don't have to tweak your entire thing.
Yeah, those are great examples. I think that makes it more tangible, makes it more the idea of kind of incorporating things that matter to that person in their job description, a little bit more clear. Now, we've also all had that moment as small businesses where you say, please give me your input, and we hear crickets. Or the meeting, who has a suggestion, and nobody says a word. What do you recommend if you're trying to change that culture around to really give your team members a safe place to share their truth and to share their suggestions, but there's still that anxiety from maybe some leftover previous misconceptions about how that will be received from leadership?
Yeah, where I see leaders go wrong with this is it's just too general of an approach, right? It's not, nobody's going to come up with these examples and ideas necessarily at the brim of their hat. It needs to be more specific. So if, let's say, the receptionist example is a great example, right? What do you need in your role to be more effective? Or this is something that we are struggling with, and give them some goal that you want to hit, some obstacle or some goal, and ask them to bring solutions on what might get you to those goals. That is far more specific. And you can also just start popcorning the ideas, and you might have to start that off, right? So give them a couple of examples. Here's some things that I was thinking about that I think might help. Do you think this would help, or do you think there's a better way? And start giving them some examples to start the ball rolling.
Yeah, that's a great idea. It's a great idea. So this is awesome. I'm so excited to dive into your book. And the book that you're releasing coming out soon is called From Spark to Fire. And I'm guessing that so many of these are within that book, so many of these suggestions.
Yes, the book is comprised not only of the tactical kind of direction, but so many of the stories that not only I have had myself as a leader and have found learnings or success with, but also great stories and examples from the leaders that I've supported over the years.
Really cool. So what is one surprising thing that we can learn if you're not in the restaurant business? What is something that's surprisingly similar about restaurant business and other small businesses outside of that realm?
So I think here's the biggest learning that I took out of restaurants. And it's going to sound like it has nothing to do with leadership, but bear with me for a minute.
Sure.
So, the biggest skill that I learned in restaurants and in retail is customer service. And here's what's at the heart of customer service. Customer service is all about identifying, anticipating, predicting what it is that that customer needs so you can help them fill that need.
Mm.
That translates over into leadership because our employees should really be viewed as our internal customers.
Mm.
And that's something that the restaurant and retail industries have led with for quite some time. And they have all found a lot of success with. And it's something that I think applies to every industry. If we view our employees as our internal customers and give them the same type of service minded support that we give to our external customers, we will find significant decreases in turnover. And I truly believe, because I have seen it happen, that business results just soar once you're able to make that small tweak.
Really cool. Really cool. So, you are doing so many things and writing this book. You have a full-time job. You've got your consulting business. You're embedded in the restaurant business still. Am I right? You're still supporting
Yes.
restaurants. You're a mom.
Yes.
You're doing
Yep.
all the things. How and what do you define happiness as? How do you find happiness, and what is your definition of happiness in this enormously multi-passionate world that you're in?
That's a really good question. I think that happiness for me is about fulfilling what's most important to me. I think just like everybody else. So I find my happiness by taking a very holistic approach to my schedule and my days. So what I mean by that is I start my days very early. I'm usually up at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm going until about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. And I really don't stop. But I am really, really good at structuring my time so that I am able to dedicate particular points in my schedule to what gives me the most joy and the most happiness. And those things that I can't stand doing and just don't bring me that joy are things that I typically will find a way to delegate out some way, so that the majority of my day and the majority of my time is spent doing the things that bring me the most happiness.
Great. That's a great leadership skill. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, what is your personal superpower then?
Oh, man. Um, I think my own personal superpower is really just the ability to slow down when things get really crazy, and see one thing at a time and be able to focus on one thing at a time. I am very good, and I have really supported a lot of leaders in being able to identify what that an end goal is and being able to kind of deconstruct sub steps to get to that end goal. So if I'm able to identify one small thing and accomplish that one thing for the day, I have felt like I have made progress towards my end goal. And it's just that one foot in front of the other mentality, by just slowing down and focusing on one thing at a time, that I think is probably my superpower. It's my secret.
That is a really good one. I think we could all learn from that for sure. That's a really good one. So before we ask your final question here today, and thank you for sharing all your knowledge with us here today, and thank you for giving us so much insight in your book. I highly recommend it to all of those business owners out there. Reminding you again, when is it going to be released, Julia?
December 1st.
Oh, wonderful. December 1st, called From Spark to Fire by Julia Bernstein. Keep an eye open for it. because I think this is going to be a game changer for many leaders, especially ones who are struggling right now in this new environment that we're in. Before we ask the final question, how can my listeners find you to find out more, and how can they follow you on social media? Where can we find you?
Yeah, so my website is jcbernstein.net. So you can, of course, always find me there. But I am on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of the things, all of the major social media platforms as JC Bernstein.
Awesome. And we'll put all those links in the show notes as well. So if any of you are interested in finding Julia, you'll be able to find them in the show notes of this episode. My final question to you, Julia, is one piece of game-changing advice for leaders in terms of a new perspective. If you could sum this up in one piece of advice, what would you say for leaders as they go through now in terms of finding greater success and having a new perspective?
So I truly believe at the heart of hearts, it is really about seeing your people, as our employees as people, and recognizing that they have lives outside of working for us. So maintaining that awareness and serving them as you would a customer. That's really the most impactful advice that I can give.
Wonderful. I love it. I love it. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you for sharing all of your wisdom with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Wonderful. And thank you to all of you for joining us today and for being open to a new perspective, being open for growth, and for serving not just your community, but your teams. Have a fabulous day. Bye-bye.